Hi everybody, today's video I'm going to explain the Ponzi-like nature of our financial system and why young people are finding it more difficult to get onto the housing ladder and how we can solve this problem more importantly. So let's go. Okay, so everybody knows in these modern times it's becoming more and more difficult to people, especially young people obviously, to get onto the property ladder. And I've been looking into it and it basically is a problem of our financial system, which is a giant Ponzi scheme. And I'm going to go into simple detail as to all the problems and also how we can fix them. And it's a lot more complex than what I'm going to simplify in this video, but I don't want to do an hour-long video. I'm going to keep it really short, sweet and simple so that people can quickly understand what's going on and how we can resolve these problems. Okay, so I'm going to start off with what makes our financial system a Ponzi. And it's two things. The first thing is the fact that we came off the gold standard and our fiat currency essentially is fake money now because it's not backed by anything. And what happens is governments print money, which should be illegal, which devalues the currency. And over time, with inflation, money becomes worth less over time. And classic example, we saw in COVID, the governments printed loads and loads of money. And one of the reasons the cost of living crisis seems so bad is because inflation went through the roof. So your £50 shopping for a few days has now gone up to £80, £90 or £100. And energy's gone through the roof. Basically, the cost of living has gone up massively because of the money printing. And because we don't have a stable financial system or a stable currency, this leads to lending with interest. So standard, when you get a mortgage, one thing I always thought was a giant scam is, let's say you wanted to get a £250,000 mortgage, you'd end up paying £250,000 in interest on top of the £250,000 you're paying back. So you're basically just giving the bank £250,000 for free. And I'll expand more on this point later of the benefits and bad side to this part of the system because some people are benefiting from it. But I'm going to show you how that's basically a scam and we want a fair system. But they are the two major problems. The first thing is the fact that we have a fiat currency not backed by gold or anything particular. It's just based on thin air. And this causes us to, or banks have to lend with interest, such as you get these ridiculous mortgage payments where you end up paying hundreds of thousands back to the bank. Now, I want to touch on the mortgages and the interest and where does all this money go and how this proliferates the wealth maintaining to the people who already have it. So essentially, if you're a young person, you can just afford to get a £250,000 mortgage. Say you're a young married couple and you go along and you pay this £250,000 mortgage and you realize you're going to have to pay back £250,000 in interest on top of it. Now I was thought, well, isn't that just a giant scam? Why can't I just get a £250,000 mortgage? But obviously, because of what I previously explained, this is why you can't. But where does this money go to? Essentially, it's split between two. So you're a hard-working young couple, you're working hard and you're paying this interest back to the bank. Now, this money is split between the bank and already rich people. Because another thing I noticed is when I put my money in an ISA, I got 4% on that money. And I was thinking, well, where does this money come from? Well, this money comes from the people paying back their mortgage payments. So if you're paying this 3% mortgage payment and somebody's getting 4 or 5% on their money that the 10 grand they put in an ISA, essentially the money is going to the people who already have money and the bank takes a split of it as well. So if they give you 4% for your ISA, and they're charging someone 5% interest, they'll take that 1% as well as the profit. So the people who already got money are making money and the bank are making money off of the interest. And basically all the money for the young, hard-working people are making now, that $250,000 they're paying is going to partly the bank and partly to the people who already have money. So it's basically a completely unfair system where people who already have money and banks who are doing minimal work are taking all the money from the hard-working young people. And this wouldn't have been as bad at the beginning of the system because it's a Ponzi system, so it's easier for the people who's getting early. But the longer the system goes on, the harder and harder it gets. And this is why, a lot of people will criticize the boomers. And it's not that it's their fault, but they're not affected by all these problems in COVID, for example, because let's say now for a young person, after all the money printed, inflation and cost of living gone up and all that problems, that affects the young people because it gets harder and harder and harder to buy a house. But the older people and rich people do not care because their house price has gone from 700,000 to 900,000. And the £100,000 they got in the stock market or in savings, they've made 50k on it. And the banks are not affected because they're earning money through the interest rates. So the people already in the system don't care. They're not affected. But the young people are completely screwed over, and it becomes harder and harder for them to get on the property ladder and for them to basically live through life. And this is why you see people with even decent jobs like nurses who are having to go to food banks to get food. When we're entering this sort of stage, you know that the system is flawed. Now, once I realized this was the problem, I asked ChatGPT, I said, give me a solution. Is there a solution? And interestingly, it gave me a perfectly good system. And it even said this could be implemented in 30 years slowly. And essentially, the new system would be going back onto a gold standard. And then you would have a digital currency that is a fixed supply, and governments would be banned from money printing. And once you get onto this sort of currency, then you wouldn't need to lend with interest. So you'd have a stable economy. And what this would do, this would remove the Ponzi-like nature of the system. Now, obviously, it goes into far more detail in the thread I asked, but I'm keeping it as simple as I can, just so people understand it simply and effectively. But under this system, it wouldn't be a Ponzi. So essentially, a house that's worth 300k now would be worth probably 305k in 30 years' time. So it would be just as easy for a young person in 50 years to buy that house than it is for the young person now to buy the house. So it's a completely fair system. And interestingly, this is to show you how much better it is. The mortgage payments, I asked ChatGPT to work it out. The mortgage payment went from, I think it was roughly, I'll put the exact numbers on the screen, but it was roughly, imagine going from mortgage payments of £1,000 a month to around £400 a month. That's what it would be like in a fair system, because you wouldn't be paying crazy amounts of interest money on your mortgage payment. And it basically said in the new system, instead of paying this £250,000 interest payment on your mortgage, you'd only pay a £10,000 fee to the bank. And this is why your mortgage payment would be reduced massively. And how much better would it be for British families to be paying £400 instead of £1,000? And the only downside of this system would be that your house wouldn't maintain a crazy value. So obviously, if you've got a house for 300k, in 30 years under the Ponzi, it'd probably be worth 500k or 600k. So even though you're paying all that interest, you may make money on the investment from the house. But as I spoke to somebody the other day, a house should not be an investment. It should just be a place for people to live and something that everybody can strive for. So I don't care if people's house prices aren't an investment. If their house is an investment, it shouldn't be an investment. And if people want to speculate and make money on investments, they can get involved in the stock market. And there was something I saw yesterday, it was positive news that Donald Trump did in America, in that it's hard for young people to own houses because of the Ponzi-like nature of our system. But also what's nefarious now is you're having all these big corporations and entities such as BlackRock and Bill Gates trying to buy up all the farmland and all the houses and the WEF, you'll own nothing and be happy. So we're getting to a point where it's going to be impossible for young people to buy houses because all these corporations own it. And then we're basically under complete communist control with no private property, where everybody basically is a renter and we're slaves to this communist system. Whereas what we want is individuals, families owning their own houses, owning their own farms. That's what we want. We don't want a bunch of commies having complete control over everything and we're their slaves. You'll own nothing and be happy, but you won't be happy. You'll be miserable. Okay, so that explains the problems with our current system and how we can implement a new system of a gold standard, fixed currency, and then young people will be able to get back on the property ladder. They can be free and we can have a happy life rather than being slaves to the WEF and to the bankers and to corporations or entities such as BlackRock. I think it's important that young people understand the problem is not politics. I think a lot of young people or people in general think, oh, well, the problem is capitalism. The problem is socialism. But ultimately, the problem is the financial system itself. In the Bitcoin community, there's a phrase called fix the money, fix the problems. And essentially, under this current Ponzi-like system, It doesn't matter what politics you have. There's nothing the politicians can do when the system is broken. If we fix the system, then we'll fix all our problems. And the vision we want is to bring this new system in, and also with a free market capitalist system where people are free. You know, we have liberty and we have sensible conservative politics. And the values that America was founded on, you know, freedom, liberty, but freedom to serve one another in love under God's grace, not to pursue our pleasures and individuality, freedom to be selfish. And to sort our countries out, this is what we need to do. And I'm putting this into a series because I've done a video on remigration plans for the UK. And that is one way we can solve our problems. Sorting out the financial system, this is another way we can solve our problems. And then I'm going to do more videos and put this all into a playlist. So I'm also going to do a video on reforming the education system, reforming the health system, reforming the spiritual and religious system, and many other topics. And it will be for people to go through these videos and they'll get a vision of how we can make things better with the power of the Logos, with the wisdom of the Logos. Because God wants us to be free and to live in peace, harmony, and happiness. That's what God wants for us. But at the moment, we're under an oppressive system, and we have communists and Islamists trying to take over and push us into the system of the dark rather than the system of the light, the Logos, Christ, and the Father. And what I'm putting into these videos is a vision of what I believe, and I'm pretty sure, of how we could live in the kingdom of heaven under God's grace and how we would change this system. Okay, so if you like what I'm talking about in this video, check out my migration video and stay tuned for more. I'm going to put all these videos into a playlist, and I'm going to encourage young people and all people to watch these videos to have a vision of what we need to do in this country and in the world. If you like what I'm talking about here, like the video and share it with as many people, especially young people, to understand how they're being screwed over and how the older generations can help us change the system. If you're new here, please subscribe for more. More will be coming out soon. And God bless everybody today. Goodbye.